Hi, I'm MTG and welcome to my channel. We're here for another deck tech breakdown, but this time we're going to be doing it about 2CMC budget-friendly ramp. And basically the focus of this was just to kind of help figure out like, hey, I don't want to spend like $80 on like a jeweled lotus. What are some good alternatives? So this can be kind of geared towards people who are a bit newer to like even just, anyone in general in mid-power or trying to just find some budget-friendly options because maybe you have like 5 decks and you don't feel like getting the latest and greatest mana rocks for every single one of your different decks that you have. But anyways, when I first started Commander, playing it consistently was actually like last August, because it was like a few months after Strixhaven dropped, and what had really gotten me back into playing Magic again was Arena and like the pandemic essentially. And part of the reason why I wasn't able to really invest in playing Magic more is just money. I didn't really have a ton of money, and I wasn't really aware of like where to find a lot of like budget friendly options, or even just really to learn about cards in general. So it kind of helped as getting into like a bit of the pre-cons and then learning how to upgrade those, and then trying to build my own decks and take those decks to local game stores where I was playing with people who are really experienced or had been playing for years, that really introduced me to different cards and different play styles and just like concepts of like really like what makes sense for like ramping and all that good stuff. Because starting out, I didn't really have any kind of gauge for that. So the goal for this video is to kind of help with that as well, where if you're like, I don't even know where the heck I would start, just I need help starting somewhere. So again, this is budget friendly, it's 2 CMC or less for the mana cost, and the budget that I'm trying to stick to is where each card is $5 or less. So to start with that are diamonds. Diamonds are a cycle. I don't remember how many times it was printed, but recently it was with the Commander Legends set. And what's really nice about these, even though they do come in tap, they allow you to tap for whatever like color that the diamond is. So each color color type has its own diamond. So for example, charcoal diamond taps for a black, there's a sky diamond that taps for blue, and the cost for these is super cheap, only 25 cents. And so you might look at this and go, why would I do this over a land? That's a valid question. So if you are on turn 2 and you have this in your hand, you have 2 lands out, you can put this down and it does enter tapped, but if you were probably going to have like a turn 1 play, you would have played it with that first, land. But what's nice about this is, especially for colors like blue or black, where maybe you're not going to have the best time ramping. I mean, treasure is just kind of changing that, but still, like, you can essentially play this like it's another land drop, if that makes sense. So the next turn when you untap, you have 3 sources of mana available instead of 2 if it was, just 2 lands that you're playing. I don't know. Hope that makes sense. But anyways, moving on to the next one. This one, maybe not as much hype behind it, but I kind of want to experiment with it more in decks. It just dropped in Kamigawa. It's called Ecologist Terrarium. That was complicated for me to say, and I have no idea why, but I hope you can read the card on the screen here. But when it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. And so what I think is really interesting about this is its secondary ability here, which is you can pay 2 and then you sacrifice it, and you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, which you can activate only at sorcery speed. So maybe the sorcery speed doesn't make this thing as sweet, but I still think it's really interesting. Maybe you have like an artifact deck that lets you kind of do some sort of recursion value, or just have recursion value in general that would let you somehow bring back an artifact. Then you can kind of use this to ramp again, or put another +1/+1 counter. So there's just some interesting aspects to that, I think. But then the other piece of this too is that +1/+1 thing that you put on maybe your commander to beef it up. So to me, this kind of seemed like an interesting, like more than just you know, like Traveler's Amulet, which kind of has the same idea where it costs 1 and then you sack it and you can grab a basic land and put it in your hand. This one, you know, lets you grab that land, put it in your hand in like 1 step, but then you could also potentially put a +1/+1 counter on, you know, whatever you're working with. So another thing to the next ramp budget friendly thing is Oranthopter Paradise, and this is a 0/2 toughness creature. It has flying, and then it can tap for 1 mana of any color. So what I really like about this is when you're trying to like think about like maybe like Arcane Signet in comparison to this. Arcane Signet only lets you tap for 1 mana color in your commander's identity. And so something that was really interesting that I was reading about on Twitter was actually if you have a colorless commander, your Arcane Signet won't tap for mana because your commander doesn't have a color identity. It's colorless. But with Ornithopter Paradise, it's not dependent on you know, what your commander's identity is. It just lets you tap and add a mana color of any source, or you know what I'm trying to say. 1 mana of any color. Words today. So in that case, like maybe you don't use Arcane Signet for that situation. You run Oranthopter Paradise instead. So I think that's really interesting. And then too, like if you're playing Winota and you attack with this, like you get a Winota trigger from it too. So it can actually kind of be like an interesting like dual purpose thing here with the fact that it has flying and you have something that cares about attack triggers. Like this, even though it doesn't have any like attack power, could still get those triggers. So I think that's like really cool. Another thing to consider, and this card might have been overhyped with Innistrad. I know I've heard some people say that they felt like this card was overly hyped. I personally have had a lot of success with it, and I actually just run it in all of my commander decks. It's Moonsilver Key. So Moonsilver Key is 2 to put onto the battlefield, and then you have to pay into it another 1, and then you can sacrifice it with the ability to search your library for an artifact card with a mana ability or a basic land, reveal it, put it into your hand, and shuffle. So what's cool about this is it's kind of a budget friendly tutor. So when you're some people just call this like your Soul Ring tutor, but if you're playing with like maybe some combos in your deck, like you have Ashnod's Altar and Phyrexian Altar, anyways, those count as things that you can tutor up with your Moonsilver Key. So if you're looking for like maybe another like spicy mana rock-ish type thing that could be a piece of your combo, you have like kind of a more budget friendly way to tutor that up. And if you don't have anything that you want to tutor up, or you already pulled, like those artifact cards that you care about and that you wanted, then you can just grab a basic land and put it on the battlefield. So you're not really missing with this. I think you would want to try to get an artifact over, like trying to put a basic land card in your hand, but this is just a really interesting and I feel like very flexible way to try to ramp for it only really being 2 CMC to play onto the battlefield, and then you pay 1 into it. So maybe you can consider that 3 CMC total, but I don't know. I like this card. So Star Compass is another option that I actually didn't learn about until I went to my local game store. And so I think I actually saw my friend that I made at my local game store play it, and I was like, I've never seen that card before. So it was really interesting to just kind of gain that knowledge just again from just playing with people that are way more experienced and outside of my normal play group, because, you learn cool stuff. But anyways, it enters the battlefield tapped, and then you can tap it to add mana to your pool based on any mana that is like a color of a basic land that you control. So if you have a swamp or a mountain, you can tap Star Compass to either produce a swamp or mountain source. So I think that's pretty cool with the flexibility, and kind of is similar to how like Fell War Stone is, but a bit more safe. So Fellwar Stone I'll talk about a bit more, where that one's based on your opponents. This one's based on what you have, which I feel like is going to be a lot more consistent. Even though it does enter the battlefield tap, if you're playing certain color types, again, like blue or black, you're not going to necessarily have as many like options for specific pieces of way that you're going to ramp. Though with everything making treasures now, maybe mana rocks are, you know, a way of the past. I don't know. But anyways, traditionally, like black and blue need kind of more like artifacts to help with ramping. A card that I really like just based on its utility is Mind Stone. So Mind Stone, you can tap it and add a colorless to your mana pool, or you can pay 1 into it, tap it, and sacrifice to draw a card. And so what I like about this is I use Mind Stone like if I'm early game to like help me cast, you know, like my commander or something. It adds a nice colorless to the mana pool, but then once I start hitting more and more of my land drops, I'm like looking at this more as like, okay, we're late game. I need to be ready to just sacrifice this, draw a card, and hopefully help me draw into my answer, or maybe help remove the top piece of, you know, like what's on my library, to then like when it is my turn, maybe I hit something better than I would have if I hadn't drawn a card with this. So I really like it. Just again, it's good for, you know, the fact that you get to draw a card. So if you need something that's both ramp and then can help you draw cards, this is a good selection. I like it. Even if it produces a colorless land, I've only had like good moments with this card. I've never like had this card out in the battlefield and been like, oh, feels bad moment. Like I've only had like positive results from this card. And then this one is included in guild signets, or included in precons is guild signets. So the one that I'll talk about here is Gruul Signet. So you pay 1 colorless and then you tap for a mountain and a forest. And so what I really like about this is it's kind of like you're investing and then you get something back to kind of help you play something sooner into the board that you wouldn't have been able to play. So for example, like if you have 3 mana and you pay 1 into this, now you have the ability to produce 4 mana and play those 4 CMC cost cards in your hand. So it's nice. I like it. And I feel like, you know, I'm investing in like a stock that successfully paid back to me. I bought 1 share and I got 2 shares back, you know? There's that. There you go. Buy, sell via magic. So this card too is, I think, included in some of the newer precons, so you might be more familiar with it. It's Wayfarer's Bobble. So it costs 1 to just put onto the battlefield, and then you pay 2, tap it, and sacrifice to go search for a basic land and put it onto the battlefield tapped. So what I like about this is it almost feels like when you drop like a green ramp spell, like Cultivate, or, you know, like 3 visits or something like that, where you cast that spell and instead of it going to your hand, you get to have the honor of just putting on the battlefield. So you could potentially hit like 2 land drops for a single turn and being ready to just like really ramp up a bit. So it's almost like you feel like a green player for a second, even if you're not necessarily playing green. I like it. It's a good card. So back to this card, which I had mentioned earlier, is Fellwar Stone. Wow. Again, stumbling over words. But again, how this one works is you tap it, add 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce. So this one might feel like a little inconsistent, but the nice part is worst case scenario, this is basically like tapping for like a colorless land, in the sense that even if it doesn't go to pay into like the color cost of like your commander, because I don't know, maybe you're in like the weird instance where no one's playing blue at your table and you're the only blue player and you're like, heck, I need more blue. You know, worst case scenario, again, this is going to be kind of equivalent to just like a colorless cost. So I still think it's like a good card to run, especially if you don't have like a lot of ramp options. Like again, if you're like with mono black and stuff, like maybe this is a good like card to just go ahead and rock. And obviously the more colors in your commander's color identity is gonna kind of matter a bit more with that. And then the last card I wanted to go over is Cold Steel Heart. So Cold Steel Heart is a snow artifact, and it enters the battlefield tapped. And as it enters the battlefield, you declare a color, and then you can tap to add 1 mana of the chosen color. So again, I really like this, just because, like, again, if you need a mana fix and you need, like, you've got like 2 swamps, but you need another mountain. Well, here's your other red source. So it's a pretty interesting card, especially just with like the snow artifact piece of it. But it also was like reprinted, I believe, with like the mystery booster set, so it's a little bit more costly compared to the other ones. But again, if you're limited on like wanting specific, like, I don't know, like ramp, because you don't have a lot of options, like this one is not a bad budget one. But yeah, so that is kind of like the overview of some mana rocks, really, that I found like helpful, especially when I was first starting to play and like really get into Commander, but wasn't quite either financially ready or emotionally ready to spend a lot of money on a single card. Like, I thought these were some good options to kind of just like help you out early on and not feel like you're left behind. Again, I think like I'm curious like how this is going to change going forward with so many sets now giving like treasure as options, because I'm almost wondering if it's going to like require kind of thinking about like your ramp a little differently. Like, yes, those treasure tokens are like temporary, but if you're casting a ton of creatures that have the ability to generate mana with treasure, I'm just really curious, like, again, like how much influence that's going to have on like how we kind of think about ramp in general. So because usually if I'm playing like green, I won't really play a lot of mana rocks. Like, I pretty much just run Soul Ring, because I feel like with spells like 3 Visits, Nature's Lore, Farseek, and Cultivate, like in those scenarios, I would rather have access to just putting land on the battlefield. For the most part, like land destruction is frowned upon. So like I feel safer if I'm using a spell like Farseek to cast that and grab a land, versus if I grab, like an artifact and put onto the battlefield. Like, someone could cast a Farewell or an Austere Command, and then Sadness Prevails as my mana like resources took a big hit. So I think green introduces a really interesting advantage where you can actually just go grab lands and be less likely to have like your mana base affected if something like Austere Command or like Farewell hits the board and exiles all artifacts. So just something to think about there. And I'm really curious, like, if any of you have any suggestions, like what are your favorite ramp pieces, and what do you recommend as far as like some budget friendly options as well. And also feel free to be like, these cards you suggested are the worst, why would you do it? And some of you might be wondering why I didn't mention Soul Rain or Hurricane Signet. It's because those are, oh, and also Commander Sphere, are in like every single precon since like precons existed. So because those cards are kind of like obvious, I think, to all the new players, I didn't really talk about those at all. But yeah, so thanks for hanging out. And again, feel free to let me know if you have what you think are better suggestions, or you think something I suggested was terrible, awful. I can take constructive criticism. So anyways, yeah, thanks for watching and have a good one. Bye.